Welcome to Business Reporter's Future of the Supply Chain campaign, hosted by The Telegraph Online. I'm Alistair Greener. The counterfeit drug market is growing rapidly and, according to Deloitte, is valued at between $75 to $200 billion. The World Health Organization estimates that 100,000 people in Africa die each year due to counterfeit medication. Yet, with no single international regulatory body, how can the pharmaceutical industry overcome this problem? To help us understand why it's such a challenge and to discuss some possible solutions, we're joined by Raja Sharif, CEO of Pharma Trust. Good morning.
Morning.
According to the World Health Organization, about 50% of drugs sold online are actually fake, which is an extraordinarily high number. How has the supply chain become so infiltrated?
Because it's so easy to set up a website, because it's so easy to copy certificates, and because it's so difficult to check the authenticity of websites, of course, a lot of people are setting up these websites to sell fake drugs to people and make enormous profits.
The complications, of course, with the supply chain are huge. You've got so many different elements involved in it, from the suppliers, manufacturers, you've got the logistics, you've got the wholesalers, retailers, pharmacies, and so on. Why is it that they haven't been able to collaborate to stop this from happening to date?
So the whole supply chain in the pharmaceutical industry, just like any other industry, is actually quite fragmented because different players or participants of the supply chain obviously provide services to a number of sectors or companies, and they use different systems. They have different hardware systems, they have different software systems, they have legacy systems which don't actually talk to each other, and that makes it extraordinarily difficult for having a unified system that is holistic in nature and gives full visibility and transparency across the whole supply chain.
And that, of course, then begs the question, why are they still using these old, outdated legacy systems and not upgrading to a more unified system?
Well, I wouldn't say they're out of date. I would say they're different. So some people will use ERM systems which are like SAP or Oracle or Great Plains, or even their own proprietary systems. And of course, the costs involved and the interruption or disruption it can cause to a business to upgrade can sometimes be so big that it's actually easier to stay on the existing systems that kind of still do the work that they need them to do.
Are there any elements apart from the technological elements that are actually preventing them from collaborating?
Well, there's costs, of course. There's some issues around confidentiality of data. There's also issues about profitability and doing things that perhaps one participant doesn't want the other one to know, just as it is in any profit kind of organization. And of course, that can make cooperation between these different entities a little bit difficult.
Given those challenges, what's the best way to go about solving those issues?
So there's a number of solutions. We think we have, of course, the best solution because we use blockchain as the core of the service we provide.
Okay, just to explain, we hear this term, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, blockchain. What exactly does that mean?
So blockchain is a peer-to-peer system which is immutable and incorruptible. Basically, it means you can write data online and you can be sure that nobody is going to change it. So blockchain is, in essence, the technology behind Bitcoin.
And how does that help in this situation of the pharmaceutical industry?
So the blockchain allows us to create immutable records, which makes it much more authentic for governments, for the consumers, and even the participants in the middle to ensure that records aren't being changed, they haven't been corrupted, they have the chain of custody from one entity to another. So if there are any problems, it's easy to trace who had what when.
And how does that fit into what Pharma Trust does?
So what we do is we provide a pharmaceutical provenance system. Essentially, we would track medicinal products from the point of manufacture all the way to consumption. And if there are any issues, or if one needs to trace where they were at any given point, we can do that. But our system is actually much bigger than that as well, because we want to utilize the data that we get from tracking each particular medicinal product to provide services like automated regulatory reporting, automated audits, and even things like automated payments where the participants want to.
I mean, this seems to be an obvious solution, and I find it extraordinary that nobody actually has done this beforehand, and this doesn't already exist, and you've effectively become the first to do it.
Well, there have been other systems previously that are available, most of which tend to be on the cloud. Ours, of course, as I said, is based on the blockchain, which is much easier to scale and actually much more cost effective for the participants to get involved in.
As you said, you used blockchain, AI, and machine learning, and you said you didn't use the cloud. Why not?
The cloud, of course, doesn't give you the security of immutability and incorruptibility. So it's not that we're saying people would change the data, but the blockchain gives governments, the public, and other companies within the supply chain the comfort that nobody can actually change the data that's on the blockchain.
You seem incredibly optimistic that despite the nature of this fragmented space, that actually your solution is still viable and still works.
Absolutely. We're agnostic when it comes to hardware, software, and even sensors. So our system can be used in any kind of supply chain situation. So as the Internet of Things grows, as the acceptability of modern technology comes in, our system should actually be able to cope with any future changes.
Given the problems that you've been talking about, it still seems incredible that there's not an international regulatory system for the pharmaceutical industry, different governments, different rules. In terms of Pharma Trust, you obviously feel that you can bridge that gap.
Looking at regulations and regulatory regimes these days, I think it's become more apparent to governments that they need similar regulations throughout the world. So there are new FDA regulations, for example, in America. There are new regulations coming into the EU, which are similar but not the same. All governments have their own ways of dealing with problems, so there are slight differences. The great thing with our system is it can cope with any regulatory regime.
Looking forward, things are going to change. You know, you're already instituting blockchain, you're using technology to really assist stopping fake drugs getting online. What about the future? Where do you see this all going in, the next 5-10 years? What are the trends we should be looking out for?
Well, there's going to be an increasing acceptance that humans are not going to be involved in the supply chain. We have already self-driving trucks. We already have ships that can sail themselves and navigate the seas. Port authorities that increasingly are beginning to use robots to load and unload equipment. Our solution, of course, is great in that it is future-proof. It will work with any new innovations that are coming through, and it will help ensure there's greater efficiency and transparency, both for governments, the pharmaceutical companies, and the public where they need it.
If that stops fake drugs becoming available to anyone, anywhere in the world, that's got to be a good thing. And it's fascinating seeing how technology can really help bring about that solution. Roger Sharif from Pharma Trust, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.